Howdy, folks, and welcome to Tea Lokes. We are doing something a little bit different today. As you may know, I have a podcast called Connor Reads Books, and this is where I read books on the podcast. But I've started doing a new segment called Author Interviews, where I interview some of the authors that I work with. So, as a celebration of launching this new segment with Connor Reads Books, this is going to be a joint episode with T. Lokes. So, please sit back and enjoy this interview with Jack Larsen. Well, howdy, listener, and welcome to Connor Reads Books. Today, we are doing something different. I am starting a segment where I interview authors that I've worked with. We talk about some of the work we've done together, and the other works of the author, as well as some of their inspirations. So please sit back and enjoy this author interview with Jack Larsen, author of Patnude. Howdy, folks, and welcome to Connor Reads Books, and our first installment of author interviews. Today, joining me via virtual meeting is Jack Larsen, a local Arizonian who writes short stories and has released books, The Facilitator, Patnude, A Story to Life, and many other short and not so short stories. It is my pleasure to introduce to the show Jack Larsen. Jack, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Connor.
Good.
Waiting for fall.
Yeah, just waiting for it to cool down a little bit. Yeah, I hear that Phoenix isn't getting much of a rain this year.
You know, we actually got a rain last night. And it
Hey,
was a hard rain for about 15 minutes and then stopped.
that sounds fantastic. That sounds really lovely. But we aren't here to talk about the weather. We're here to talk about you and your writing journeys. So,
Yes, sir.
why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your life story?
Well, I went to Northern Arizona University.
Rock on.
I had a degree in accounting and basically spent all of my career in accounting as a certified public accountant. We had our own firm for 30 plus years, something like that. And then in effect, retired gradually.
Hmm.
And as I was sort of retiring, I started taking some writing classes at ASU and sort of got interested in writing.
Right.
And actually have written a number of books over the years and stories. And I still continue with a writing class. We meet 6 months out of the year, and it's a small group of us, and it's fascinating to do this. That
Right.
we have a writing assignment every week of something bizarre that we would never ever think of writing,
Nice.
and we have to write about it. And there's about six of us. And one of the things that just amazes me, Connor, is we get a topic to write about, and all six of us do something different with that topic.
Interesting.
You would think that we would all follow a similar pattern or something, and we don't. We're all different, but it's great to do it. And
Yeah.
our instructor spends 6 months of the year here in Arizona and 6 months in the UK.
Oh,
And I
nice.
will ask you, what 6 months does she spend in the UK? And what 6 months does she spend in Phoenix?
I think I know. I think I have an idea.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
So that's so interesting. So, like, you started writing after you retired and you joined a class, and that's great. I mean, definitely got to keep the sword sharp, so to speak. But
Yes.
what drew you to writing? Like, what inspired you to begin writing?
It's hard to say. It just sounded interesting to do, and I liked the challenge. And then uh, at one point in time, and I don't know why, I decided I wanted to try and write a book, and that's The Facilitator.
Right.
And that book was a difficult book to write. Took me about 3 years with help from Jim Haynes. And it took a lot of research and study and etc.
Right.
To do. Uh, since that, I've said, no, I'm not doing that kind of book anymore.
Right.
And I do sort of light. Some of them aren't so light, but
Right.
just stories that I do. And I don't know what it is. I transitioned from numbers to writing, and I enjoy writing. I find it interesting. I normally don't know where I'm going when I start.
Nice.
You know,
That's
I,
interesting.
you know, I'm going to write about Connor walking in and sitting down, and then I'm not sure what happens next.
Interesting. And I've noticed in your writing that you do seem to emphasize like that character element. And what, in your opinion, makes a character compelling, or what about having a fleshed out character helps you navigate through writing a scene?
I don't know that I've actually thought about that, but I like interesting characters,
Absolutely.
and I like to think that I'm actually thinking like the character.
Right.
And that when I'm again writing about Connor, I'm thinking how Connor thinks. And then if I switch over to write about Jack, I all of a sudden have to start thinking, how does Jack think and what does Jack do?
Right.
Um, I just try and put myself into the character, and I try and do somewhat unusual traits in character.
Right. I mean, so I am the performer and I read through Pat Nude, and you have definitely a lot of really like fun and colorful characters in there.
Mhm.
Um so that's definitely really interesting. Some of that really shines that I notice in your writing. So like in some ways do you feel like it's kind of when you're writing a scene it's almost like playing a game of like chess against yourself. It's kind of like that character makes a move, then you switch to the other side of the table and see how that character would react and keep
Yes,
moving
yes,
forward.
yes. You start, and again, I don't have scenes planned or any of that. I just kind of start going, and I react to, again, if you're the lead character, Connor, you say something, and I have another character. Well, then that character has to respond, and
Right.
I like to think that I'm thinking like the different characters, but I find that fun to do and interesting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, an avid fan of I'm not sure if you're familiar with the game Dungeons and Dragons. Um, but it's kind of like a storytelling game where you role play as characters. So I definitely understand that like getting into the role of a character and acting as one. It's a lot of fun and definitely makes for an interesting story.
Hmm, interesting.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, do you think it's more interesting to have a character with flaws, or do you like to go to like a character with a specific like trait?
I don't know that I've thought of that. I think most of my characters have some flaws in them, obvious, but I don't know that I do a particular trait. I think it
Hmm.
just kind of fits with the character
Right.
as I start writing about them.
Right.
Uh, and I try and do a number of somewhat, when I say unusual, at least unusual in my judgment,
Hmm.
um, with characters.
Yeah.
And I sort of, they sort of become like friends when you're writing about them, or associates, or, you're kind of eavesdropping on them as
Right.
you're writing. And it frequently, and surprise is the wrong word, that's too strong. Uh, then I'll use surprise on where my characters go and what they say and what they do
Right.
is not planned out. I don't have like an outline. If I'm having a meeting with you, Connor, I don't sit down with an outline on what you said, how are you dressed, did you spill your coffee,
Right.
blah blah blah. I just kind of go and see what happens.
That's fun. That's a really interesting way to approach writing. That you start from the beginning and then like work your way through the scene and kind of let it like unfold and go organically.
Yeah, sometimes I'll also, after I start something or I do something, I'm a little bit, and I don't know how far it goes, but somewhere along the line, I will sometimes write the ending, write the last chapter, And then I have to figure out, how do I get from point B over to point Z?
Right.
And sometimes I will write the last chapter and then again just have to keep working to try and get to the ending that I wrote, which I also find fascinating.
Right. That's very interesting. Well, I want to switch gears a little bit and I want to talk about your book, Pat Nude,
Oh, yes.
as it has been recently released on Audible. So, as the performer of Pat Nude and a local Arizonian myself, I found that the detailed geographical references of the region really like colored the story and made it feel really full. And I wanted to know, what is it about East Arizona that made it such a good backdrop for this story?
I don't know that there was any sophisticated research or anything. The story came back. My wife and I usually go down to Tucson over the Christmas holidays, and we take Route 77 back up to Globe and then down to Phoenix. That's a
Right.
fantastic, beautiful drop.
So beautiful.
And what got me off on it was the narrow road 77 has passing lanes every now and then.
Hmm.
And then I kind of went off on a tangent and said, what if that was fake? There was never any passing lanes. It said passing lane 2 miles. When you got to the 2 miles, there was no passing lane. And we put up another sign. So that got me off on that. And then I started, I don't know how I got on Pat Nude, bringing a corpse back up from Phoenix to a funeral. And I got on that and then just kind of went off on that. So once I got him up in Globe,
Yeah.
then we had to do a story of a mortician functioning in Globe and being somewhat of a character.
Yeah.
And as you're well aware, morticians are when I say unusual people, there's not thousands of morticians in Globe, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
There's one or two or three or four. There's not hundreds. I mean, you don't. How often do you go out and meet a mortician where you meet all kinds of other people?
Right.
Uh, so I like that concept of having an unusual person and his relationships with bizarre people and so forth, and just went off on that and just kept writing stories. And you get a character, and the character would kind of go someplace or do something, and it was fun to do. It was a fun book to write.
It was a fun book to read. It was a lot of fun. I mean, touching on the geography part again, I have gone up and down the 77 a lot. Before I started the business that I own, the L. Connor Voice LLC, I used to do environmental air quality. So I was going through
Oh,
East Arizona. I was going to like Safford, Morenci, through Globe. And so like I was picking up, all of this geography and really reading it, like hearing the roads they went down, the choices they made, it just really was very full to me, especially because I had some of that like past experience with it. And I think you make like a really good point about the mortician being like an odd character. Because yeah, I have met very few morticians. I don't actually know if I've met one, but
and if you lived in Globe, how many morticians are there?
right, very
I mean,
few.
when you get serious and you think about a mortician, and especially in a small town where you know everybody, that has to be a difficult job where you're dealing with death on a routine basis and try and maintain some sanity to yourself,
Right.
that all you deal with is a sadness.
Yeah, that's
I
very
mean,
true.
yeah, you have to have an ability, in my judgment, to be able to be positive in your life and enjoy things and
Yeah.
then make some unusual characters.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's I think it's an interesting point, that there might be so few morticians in a smaller town like Globe. And I think that it makes this great sort of vertices for characters to enter in and out of the story with Pat Nude, because like one thing we all have in common is that one day our lives will end. And so I think it's a really interesting choice to have Pat Nude be a mortician because of that. He gets to see so many different characters and learn about the people who come through the folks who visit, or like through the details of their demise. Um,
Yes.
so I think it was just a great choice to
Yeah.
have a mortician as a character.
Yeah, fun book. Again, fun book to write, and uh, again, creating some not a super unusual, but an unusual guy because we don't run into a lot of morticians.
Right. And I mean, as far as Pat Newt is as a character, like he seems like he's a very like level-headed guy. I think you write that in very well. Um, Even his boss, I am best, is also a pretty level-headed guy as well. I mean, he loves his color orange, and sometimes he's not the best listener, but uh, just a really wonderful character. Really wonderful characters you've built.
I also have to add, I thought I was really, really clever. This is patting myself on the back
Please
when I
do.
picked up the name I Am Best.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see someone going through and introducing themselves as I Am Best.
Right.
And I just thought, boy, Jack, you're really clever with this one.
Yeah, it's definitely funny, and that character embodies that sort of "I am best" energy. Um, so it's a lot of fun, and I don't wanna give, a lot of story elements away, for those listeners, who want to listen to the book. I also wanted to mention that I think that you find this really nice balance like of finding this like humor, finding like the levity, but also the dark humor, but then also like moments of tenderness when Pat Newt is learning about the characters who, come through the morgue. And, I wanted to ask, this is one question I have, is like, along with a book like The Facilitator, that thriller mystery. And even Pat Newt has elements of like mystery and obviously death and some twists and turns. So, my question to you is, how do you manage to find the balance in humor and mystery along with themes like murder and loss and death?
I don't know that I can answer that. That might be just something I do or my style. Uh, Even though I was an accountant all of my life, I thought I had some humor and stuff that I did. Uh, I don't know that I can give you a good answer on how I do that. I certainly have a number of books that I've written that haven't been published, and I think most of my characters have some unusual humor characteristics and that, but you'd still like them, and they're people that I think that you would like to know.
Right, definitely.
And I don't know how I do it. I guess it just, based on my experience or me or my personality, it's not something that I sit down with, a strategic plan.
Right.
I'm writing about Connor and, what's he like and is he really humorous? And, it just happens once I start writing.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I mean, I think you do a really great job at it. I mean, I think there were chapters where I could read it and I'd be like, this is kind of dark, but then I find myself chuckling, and then, that chapter is finished, and you're left with this sort of like something to think about. You see like the tenderness, those human aspects to all those characters, and all of their like fun little things that they do. Um Again, I want to make a lot of references to the book, but I also really want to be mindful not to like spoil anything. Um I found myself one thing that I'll try to keep fairly vague, but there was one character that you wrote, and unfortunately, I can't remember his name, but he was an older guy who lived at a retirement home who loved going fast.
Mhm.
He just loved going fast, and he was racing around on his electric wheelchair. And that character made like an impact on me. I just thought it was so fun, and how his like pursuit of going fast and racing like affected all those people in the retirement home around him, and how that through a, unfortunately somewhat humorous way, met his demise through his pursuit of speed. Um, but I just remember thinking, after that chapter was finished, just really thinking about like what a human aspect it was. And that, I don't know, maybe I'm losing my train of thought here a little bit, but you know, I just thought it was really interesting to have this character who had great desires, and through them, he lived a full life, but also ended his life the way he lived it, which felt impactful to me.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was just a character that I had, and a little of that might have of the character might have come off is my mother was in a senior center before she passed away, and she had an electric scooter, and she used to drive it too fast. So I was forced to, get in there and reduce the controls so she couldn't drive it fast.
Right.
Uh, and I don't know if some of that of my mother's situation rubbed off on me on that,
Right.
but it was just, someone that a character that I came up with.
Yeah, that's interesting. That was a really great character. So I want to switch gears a little bit again. And I want to ask you, if you could give yourself advice, if you could give the you who has not written yet but wants to write, if you could give that guy advice, what advice would you give him?
Well, it's very simple. Write, pick up a pencil. First of all, I write all of everything longhand. I use legal pads, double space, and I write with pencil. And I have people type and all that stuff. And I do that because I'm not a good typist. I don't want to be fooling around with technology and stuff. So instead of writing, I'm worrying about how does this work? How did I set it? I just write my thoughts.
Right.
And I like doing that. But basically, you have to write. You just have to pick up, I have to give you the pencil and say, I want you to write about whatever, the door you're looking at,
Right.
and you need to do it. One of the exercises that, and I do not do this every day, but I do it on occasion,
Hmm.
is called morning page, where you have to write a page or two about whatever. I sit down, I give you a pencil
Hmm.
and a piece of paper and say, Connor, fill it up.
Right.
And and I don't care what you say, if you just keep repeating the same sentence, what should I write? What should I write? Fill it up. And I think sometimes that helps you. But you really just need to sit down and start writing and not be thinking of, how brilliant you're going to be. And you just need to, again, you need to start doing it. And then if you're writing something that takes research, well, then you need to stop and do research and all that stuff.
Right.
Otherwise, it again, it's like, cleaning the house. What do? You just sit there and think about it, and no, you just start cleaning. Well, I pick up the trash, I take the garbage out, and it's the same principle. You just got to do something, and
Right.
don't come up with all these excuses. Oh, I don't have any brilliant ideas. I don't know what to write about. I don't care. Just start writing.
And that's a really great piece of advice, is
Yeah,
just
you
start.
just got to do something. Yeah, do it. Even if it's
Nice.
bad, it doesn't matter if it's bad. You just need to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, and I feel like that transfers to a lot of things in life, if you're thinking about it, something you wanna do, get started, and that's the
Just
best
do
way to
it.
start.
Yeah, yes, exactly right.
And, for folks who have been writing and maybe they're kind of like they're on the fence about joining, like, a writing class, for instance, why do you think it is so important to take writing classes?
Well, on the small writing class that I belong to, I like it because half the year we meet once a week. I'm forced to write about something I have no interest in, have no intention ever writing about, but nevertheless, I have to write something and I have to turn the paper in the following week. and I have to read my writing to the class. So I
All
got
right.
to do something.
Right.
So whatever crazy topic you give me that makes no sense, I have no interest in, blah, 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 I still got to do something. And I think that gives you discipline to perform that, you have to do something.
Right.
And you know that you got to turn it in, and you know you're going to have to stand up and read what you wrote.
Right.
Uh, and that's a great challenge, and it is good for creativity. And I'm being repetitious now. Peggy Eilert is our instructor, and Peggy comes up with all these crazy things that nobody that is sane would ever give you, and you have to write about it. And it's like, what the hell would ever write about this thing? But nevertheless, on the following Monday, you're going to be standing there reading something you wrote. Uh,
Interesting.
so again, that is one of the things that I do like about the writing is it forces you to write about something that you have no interest about, usually have no knowledge about, but you have to do something.
Right. And
Right.
that yeah, and that probably helps, like, flex different creative muscles, kind of like
Oh
you were
yeah.
saying.
Oh yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
No question. Because again, when I say you're forced to write about something. And you have to make what you write reasonably good because other people are going to review it, and you got to read the darn thing in front of them.
That's right.
You know.
Right.
So and I'm being repetitious on this. I realize
Ah, it's
that's
okay.
what happens when you're old. You can be repetitious. It just fascinates me when we get a topic that whatever we write, we're all totally different. You wouldn't, it just
Right.
it fascinates me on how our mindsets are different, and how we react to what you tell me or give me to write about is so different.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting, it's looking at one item or one prompt, right? And then you get so many different perspectives because
Yes,
everyone's lived like a unique life and they see
yes,
things differently. Jack, thank you so much for taking some time and talking with me today. We're going to start winding down, and I just have like a few more questions to ask
sure.
you here. So, one, for folks who are interested in finding your books and reading what you've written, where can they go?
You can go to Amazon, or you can go. I think you can go to Inkwell's website, but go to Amazon and just look up the books.
Sounds good. And folks, we will put links in the episode notes. So if you want to go and find those books, check out the episode notes, click the links, and you'll be right there.
And please buy the book because I need the money.
Yes, please buy the books. You won't regret it.
No, and again,
Uh,
I need the money. I'm old. I
yeah.
need food.
Come on, feed Jack, guys.
Yeah, and I need to buy new clothes. I'm wearing these old clothes.
So, Jack,
Yes.
finally, my question for you is what is on the horizon? What things are you working on? What's next?
Well, I have a book that we're about to be published. It's called Schmidt Finds the Perfect Woman.
Nice. Schmidt finds the perfect woman.
Perfect Woman. And it takes place during when COVID was here.
Mm,
And they sort of meet at a Costco, and then kind of wind up together, wind up getting married. And the woman is a very strong, clever, beautiful woman. And
right,
they're working on finding a career for Schmidt. And he goes by Schmidt. Everybody calls him that.
right.
And the conclusion of the book is what kind of career he winds up with and what's happened to them and so forth.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's
it's
a
a nice little book.
yeah, that sounds like it'll be nice. And
And it's very similar. When I say similar to Patton, it's same style.
mm,
Excuse me. Uh, Tom Rodriguez. did the characters for the book, the graphics,
Nice.
and he does a very good job, very creative person. Uh, and we're just doing some final editing before we get it to Inkwell to publish it.
That's really exciting. That's
No, it
awesome.
is exciting,
Yeah.
and again, it's a similar book to Patton's style-wise, total
Right.
different topic and characters and all that.
Right.
Uh, with the exception of, and one thing that I do, I don't know that this is clever, but I like to think it's clever, Connor.
Let's hear it.
And then sometimes I might need the characters in them. For example, in Profanishment, we need to have a detective do something in it. Well, I have when I say a series, 5 or 6 detective books called Maps and Sadie Mysteries, and that's they're detectives. So I'll bring those people in.
Nice.
When Profanishment needs a detective, I bring those in, and the same with if I have in one book, I have a minister uh, and his wife and their relationships, and I'll bring them in if I need characters to do something. Not that they're big lead characters, but I need,
Absolutely. And I think that just helps. Like, I think that's clever, one. And I think it's really cool, like, kind of builds the world, like the universe that you're making. And like these
right.
characters keep showing up and like it makes it feel more real. I think that's great.
Yeah. So again, if I writing a book and all of a sudden I need a detective, well, I'd say, okay, Maps and Sadie are my detectives now.
Perfect.
But again, it is fun writing, and I'm working on a book now that I know what the ending is because I wrote the ending.
Right.
I don't think it's very good, but I still keep getting there, but it's
Well,
still
it
fun to do. It's still fun to do, and it's fun
absolutely.
to sit down. And again, as I've told you again for the 10th time, Connor sits down, and what does he do next?
I don't
Well,
know.
he opens the door, and he said, "What?" And then we go from there.
Right. And it's a lot about the journey too, you
Yes,
know?
yes, yes. Now he was limping badly when he walked to the door. How did that happen?
Got hit by a bicyclist.
Yeah. Oh, he bought the wrong size shoes. He doesn't know how to buy good shoes.
Yep. Nice. Well, Jack, thank you so much for coming on to the show today and having an interview with me, talking a bit about your process writing, what got you into writing, and sharing a little bit about these really creative and immersive worlds that you've written.
Well, thank you for interviewing me. It was very nice. I appreciate it.
Of
You've done a
course.
very good job. And you've actually been somewhat polite to me, Connor. Not real
Some,
polite, but somewhat polite.
I'll settle for that.
Yeah.
Well, good. I'm glad that at least I could be partially hospitable.
Right. And you not once said, old guy or anything like that. You've, been somewhat courteous.
Well, I appreciate that. And why would I say old guy? I'm going to be there too.
Yeah, well,
Well, thank you again, Jack, and thank you again so much listeners for tuning in to this first author interview. Bye-bye.
bye-bye. And thank you.
This has been Connor Reads Books. Toodaloo. Hope that you enjoyed this interview with Jack Larsen today. If you're interested in reading his books or hearing the audiobook, the links are in the episode notes. Please check them out. And don't forget to like, share this episode, and leave a review. You can follow me on social media at LConnorVoice. Links are in the episode notes. A huge thank you to Sound Monk Studios for providing the unforgettable Connor Reads Books theme. Until next we turn the page,